Good day, folks. This is Chris Toron again, checking in for TradeTaxPlus Center of Excellence. In this second video, we'll look at still at the increase in the VAT rate, or the proposed increase in the VAT rate, and we'll look at these general transitional rules. How do you deal with transactions that span the transition period? Now, as we know, VAT goes up on the 1st of April, or that was proposed, from 14 to 15%. And if we look at these transitional rules, we just take a step back for a moment, then have a look at what the rules are trying to achieve. Essentially, it wants supplies after 1 April 2018 to be subject to VAT at 15%, and it wants supplies pre-VAT, the increase, to be at 14%. Now, if you read the sections, it's quite daunting. There's ifs and buts and subject tos and all sorts of things, and links to A's and B's and C's. It becomes quite challenging until you break it down into its essence, and then it is actually quite simple. So what the VAT Act provides for, it provides for supplies, firstly for time of supplies after 1 April. So I can do a physical supply, I can deliver goods to you, or I can render a service, but if I only issue my invoice after 1 April, then the time of supply is in the new tax regime, the 15%, and technically you should be charging VAT at 15%. So what the transitional rule says is you have to make some kind of an apportionment. For goods, it says you must have delivered those goods by 20 days after the date of announcement, not the date of announcement, sorry, after the effective date, but because there are public holidays and all sorts of things in the middle, it essentially would be the 23rd of April. So if I delivered those goods by the 23rd of April, that is still a 14%. If I deliver the goods after that date, irrespective of what the contractual arrangements are, that would fall into the new rules. And there's a presumption there, of course, that the sale wasn't a real sale because the delivery took such a long time to make. Now, when it comes to services, services, essentially they're looking at when the services were physically rendered. Now that's quite challenging under certain circumstances. If you have timesheets, probably the timesheets will be an indication of when the work was done. If you have other ways of measurement, time, for example, based on time, could be maybe a little bit on output, challenging, but the onus is on the taxpayer to prove what that measurement should be. So the rule then is if the time of supply is after 1 April, because we're issuing an invoice in that date, on the date, that time of supply is after 1 April, then you can do an apportionment, and it's regarded as two supplies. The supply pre to 1 April will be subject to VAT at 14%. The supply post 1 April 2018 will be subject to VAT at 15% then. Then there's a special rule that says if you have a time of supply between the time that the increase was announced, remember the Minister of Finance announced it on the 21st of February 2018. So between that date and the effective date of the increase, which is 1 April, if the time of supply is triggered in that period, not the contract is concluded, the time of supply. So if you all of a sudden have this urge to quickly issue invoices in that period to still get the benefit of the lower VAT rate, then the VAT Act says under those circumstances, certain special rules will apply. There, the 21-day rule applies. Goods must be delivered within 21 days. And the other rule that applies is when services are rendered, it's in terms of the actual services rendered. So it's really just the opposite of what we've discussed before. The one is where the time of supply is after the 1st of April. In this case, the time of supply is before the 1st of April. But in both instances, the impact is that SARS is looking to tax it when the actual physical supply took place, as opposed to the supply from a pure legal perspective. Now that's by and large, well, before we get there, there's one exception to that rule, And that exception is if you normally would have issued an invoice in any event. So for example, let's take an example. Let's say I've got a subscription service and my subscription period runs from the 1st of March to the 28th of February of each year. So if I give you an invoice on day 1, and that is the way I customarily issue my invoices, the invoice still remains at 14%, irrespective of the fact that you will subsequently render the services after the 1st of April. Keep in mind, when you apply this rule, the onus is on the taxpayer to prove that you customarily supply services in that fashion. So if you all of a sudden decide at a particular point in time you want to change your way of doing business and now issue invoices before the 1st of April, I think you're going to be challenged to prove that that is a practice customarily applied in your business. There is no custom to prove that. Okay, so that's a summary of the basic rules. In the next video, we'll look at special rules, specifically fixed property and lay-by agreements. But for now, it's Chris Teron checking out for TradeTaxPlus, Center of Excellence.